mean time to WTF for a security alert is more than a minute, it's time to look at Lacework. Lacework will help you get your security act together for everything from compliant service configurations to container app relationships, all without the need for PhDs in AWS to write the rules. If you're building a secure business on AWS with compliance requirements, you don't really have time to choose between antivirus or firewall companies to help you secure your stack. That's why Lacework is built from the ground up for the cloud. Low effort, high visibility, and detection. To learn more, visit lacework.com. Ever notice how security tends to be one of those things that isn't particularly welcoming to folks who don't already have the word security somewhere in their job title? Introducing our fix to that. Meanwhile, in security. To sign up for the newsletter or to find the podcast, visit meanwhileinsecurity.com. Coming soon from the Duckbill Group. A while back, I opined on Twitter that a site I ran, stop.lying.cloud, was unacceptably slow. To save you typing that into your browser, that site retrieves the current version of the AWS status page, applies some transformations to clean up part of the endless sea of green, and then returns the result. And it did this via Lambda at Edge. I now know that this was wrong. Instead of the roughly 23 seconds it took when I made the complaint, it now comfortably and reliably returns in less than a second every time. The fix, as was helpfully suggested by former AWS employee Randall Hunt, was dead simple. Stop trying to perform this transform on every request. Instead, have a Lambda function fire off once a minute, perform that job, stuff the result into an S3 bucket behind CloudFront without any caching, and then call it a day. Now, two groups of people are going to hear this and have different responses. The first group is going to say, no kidding, of course that's how you should do it. And the second group is going to say, holy crap, I can't believe I didn't think about that. And maybe they're getting angry about it too, because I was solidly in group 2 on that one, and I suspect I'm not alone. This distills down to the mental model I held for Lambda functions, specifically Lambda at Edge. My mental model was that Lambda would apply per request, operating on the payload of that request. This is how it works for every example you'll see that uses Edge functions, from high-level dynamic responses to injecting the same static headers on every request. People think about this in a steady, reliable way. Lambda fires off when there's work to be done. If you can decouple how you think about Lambda from the request invocation model, two things happen. One is that it absolutely broadens the applicability of Lambda to a variety of problems you may have previously considered it ill-suited for due to cold starts, latency issues, scalability reasons, etc. And two, purists will be mad at you. Some people, me for example, treat Lambda as a synchronous compute resource when it's also a highly capable asynchronous response resource. Don't confuse this with async versus sync invocations. This is another layer of the stack entirely. In other words, if you can preload the work, then the time it takes the Lambda to provision, invoke, execute, and return becomes irrelevant. The billing also becomes advantageous above certain volumes. The Lambda charge for this example remains fixed regardless of how much or how little traffic my site is going to receive. This episode is sponsored by ExtraHop. ExtraHop provides threat detection and response for the enterprise, not the starship. On-prem security doesn't translate well to cloud or multi-cloud environments, and that's not even counting IoT. ExtraHop automatically discovers everything inside the perimeter, including your cloud workloads and IoT devices, detects these threats up to 35% faster, and helps you act immediately. Ask for a free trial of detection and response for AWS today at extrahop.com/trial. The root of this divergence of understanding comes down to how Lambda was originally positioned. It started out as a service that was defined by its restrictions. Only certain languages were permitted. You could only have a certain runtime per function. Cold starts were a serious problem. You could only allocate so much RAM per function, and so on. Over time, these restrictions started being relaxed and the service expanded. So a lot of these early understandings of the platform became rapidly out of date. The idea of a Lambda invoking on every user request was in no small part how the vision of the service was originally presented. My new approach of having it fire off once a minute like some kind of blunt instrument is anathema to that perspective, but it's also effective. Suddenly, latency of the Lambda function no longer matters. If it takes 2 seconds to run or 20, it's all the same to the functioning of the stop.lying.cloud site. Should it completely fail to execute because distributed systems are hard, viewers will simply see a site that's 1 minute out of date. It's still a horrifying site, don't misunderstand me. The HTML that's generated is 7.5 megabytes because of what it's forced to deal with, and there are no doubt further optimizations that could be made. But the honest truth of the matter is that I just don't care. It's a toy site that I came up with as mostly a joke and to get experience with a few different technologies. I no longer need that experience. So just do the thing and then get out of my way becomes my perspective. And with that lax in elegance, it makes up for in solving the problem so I can focus on higher value tasks. This is, more than anything else, the actual spirit of Lambda, and serverless as a whole for that matter. Getting the technology out of the way to solve the business problem as efficiently as possible. If it's not done in the most technically elegant way, well, you're probably doing it right.
This has been a Humble Pod production. Stay humble.